This is Ghosts of Asia, where forgotten spirits breathe through concrete walls, where silence hides centuries of sorrow, and where modern lights cannot chase away the darkness rooted deep beneath our cities. Tonight, we ride the elevator to a floor that doesn't exist, a space not found in blueprints, a floor that was never built, but somehow it's still waiting for you, just beyond the flicker of fluorescent lights, just between memory and oblivion. Take a breath, step inside, because once those elevator doors close, you may not come back alone. The air smelled new, synthetic, like laminated wood, fresh paint, and filtered air pretending to be pure. As the automatic doors slid open, Dao stepped into the marble-floored lobby of Nirvana Residences, dragging two small suitcases behind her. Her footsteps echoed with the kind of confidence she didn't quite feel. Mark was already talking to the receptionist, a young man in a crisp white shirt and an awkward smile that stretched too wide. The name tag read Ken. His voice was soft and professional, but Dao wasn't listening. Her eyes wandered. The lobby was too perfect. White orchids arranged in a glass bowl. Floor tiles reflecting the overhead LED panels like a polished mirror. No dust, no scent of incense, no trace of life beyond calculated design. It felt like a showroom waiting to be touched, disturbed, made real. She didn't like it. Mark waved her over. "Babe, we're all set. Unit 2907, top floor, views for days." Dao managed to smile and nodded, but her gaze drifted toward the elevators. There were three of them. Seamless silver doors, brushed metal. One of them, the one on the left, had a tiny dent near the bottom, like something had struck it hard but had been smoothed over, almost erased. The elevator chimed. Ken gestured. "Please take elevator 3. It goes directly to the high zones. You're in the Sky Serenity tier." Dao and Mark stepped in. The doors whispered shut behind them. The control panel inside gleamed with numbered floors from 1 to 35. No floor 13, Dao noticed. A common superstition, not just in Thailand. Superstitions had a strange way of surviving modernity, even here in this glass and chrome temple to progress. But her brow furrowed. There was a 14A. Between 14 and 15, a small, oddly spaced button that read 14A in a slightly different font. She pressed it lightly, just to see. Nothing lit up. Mark grinned beside her. "Probably just a software error, or a maintenance zone. These fancy buildings are full of secret levels." Dao didn't answer. She stared at her own reflection in the mirrored elevator wall. She looked tired, not just from the move, from everything. The elevator climbed, smooth, silent, like it was floating rather than rising. Floor numbers blinked above the door in amber light. 11, 12, 14, 14A, it flickered on just for a split second, then disappeared. Mark didn't notice, but Dao saw it, and something behind her reflection, just for a breath, moved ever so slightly. Unit 2907 was as pristine as promised. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a painting. Bangkok's lights glittered below, blurred through the city's endless heat haze. The river snaked through the buildings like a dark ribbon, unmoving. The condo was fully furnished, minimalist, neutral colors, clean lines. Too clean. As Mark buzzed around testing light switches and marveling at the built-in smart system, Dao stood by the window and stared down at the city. Somewhere far below, cars moved like blood through veins. Life pulsed, real, messy, human life. But up here, It felt removed, like being in a hotel that didn't allow guests, or a dollhouse that forgot to include its dolls. Behind her, the smart speaker chirped to life. "Welcome to Nirvana, Dao. You are now home." She blinked. She hadn't said anything. Mark laughed. "Creepy, huh? But it's synced to your name from the leasing doc. Tech magic." Dao didn't laugh. She turned off the speaker. That night, they ate delivery food on the floor. The dining table hadn't arrived yet. Mark cracked open a bottle of wine and toasted to new beginnings, to clean slates, to elevating their lifestyle, as he put it. Dao clinked glasses, but drank little. She kept glancing at the window, at the elevator panel in her memory, at the way 14A had flickered like a stutter in reality. She couldn't sleep. The air conditioning hummed low. The bedroom curtains swayed through the windows were sealed shut. Mark slept beside her, breath slow, peaceful. Dao got up. She walked barefoot to the hallway toward the elevator bank. It was 2:13 a.m. The building was silent, uneerily so. Not even the soft echo of a neighbor's late-night TV. No footsteps, no distant doors. Nothing. She stood in front of elevator 3, the same one from earlier. The dent was still there, barely visible. Her finger hovered over the call button. The lights above the elevator blinked on. Ding! The doors slid open. Empty. Dao stepped in. Inside, the control panel was blank. No numbers, no glowing circles, just a black screen. Then, without her touching anything, the doors closed. The screen blinked once, going down. Her heart skipped. She hadn't pressed anything. The amber numbers lit up. 29, 28, 27. The descent was smooth, silent, but something about the air felt wrong, heavy, like the pressure changed subtly the way it does before a storm. The elevator slowed around floor 14. Dao held her breath. The screen read 14. Then it glitched. The amber light scrambled, and for a full second it read 14A. The elevator stopped, but the doors didn't open. The lights dimmed a little. The air felt thinner. Dao felt her skin prickle, like the hairs on her arms stood up without her noticing. Then a sound. Faint. Faint enough she almost convinced herself it wasn't real. A slow, scraping sound, like nails dragged across metal. It came from outside the doors, or perhaps from the walls. The mirror behind her reflected her own pale face, but something in her expression looked unfamiliar, as if she was watching herself from the outside. The elevator jerked once, a soft mechanical shudder. The screen blinked, reset, 15. The elevator rose again. Dao exhaled. The next morning, Mark made coffee and ranted about work emails. Dao didn't say anything. She just stared at the elevator panel across the hallway, where 14A didn't glow anymore, where nothing had happened, where something definitely had happened. And when she passed the spirit house by the parking entrance, a forgotten, dust-covered shrine nestled behind ornamental bushes, she paused. The incense sticks were all burned out. No offerings, no flowers, no attention. Forgotten. Just like that floor, just like those footsteps she almost heard behind the mirror. Dao whispered, almost involuntarily, "I saw you." The wind picked up ever so slightly. The next night, The elevator stopped again, but this time Dao was alone. Mark had gone out for dinner with colleagues, one of those endless networking dinners he claimed were essential for career growth. Dao wasn't in the mood. She stayed behind, claiming exhaustion, though she didn't feel tired, not exactly. Something was pulling at her thoughts, like a thread snagged in the back of her mind, something left undone, unspoken, unacknowledged. The apartment felt heavy with silence, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but expectant, as if something was listening, waiting. At 9:43 p.m., Dao stood barefoot at the door, staring into the hallway. The soft golden glow of the corridor lights stretched outward like a tunnel. No sounds, no footsteps, no voices behind doors. The city below buzzed on, but up here it was another world entirely. She walked slowly toward the elevator bank. Elevator 3 arrived almost instantly. The silver doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Dao hesitated for the briefest moment before stepping inside. The control panel lit up, a sleek black interface with glowing blue buttons. She pressed G for ground floor. She wasn't going anywhere in particular. She just needed to be moving. The elevator began its descent, smooth and soundless. 28, 27, 26. Her reflection in the mirrored walls stood beside her like a second self, quiet, still, a little too pale. Then, the lights dimmed, slightly, barely noticeable, but Dao felt it. The air shifted. The elevator slowed. The floor indicator blinked. 14. Then the panel flickered. The numbers scrambled, rearranged, then locked into place. 14A. Dao froze. The elevator stopped, but the doors did not open. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No sound, no movement, just stillness so complete it became pressure. Then came the scraping again. Not loud, just a soft, dragging sound, like something with long nails brushing against the other side of the door. It moved slowly, from one side to the other, then back again. Dao's breath hitched in her throat. She pressed the emergency call button. Nothing. She pressed it again. Still nothing. The lights dimmed a little more. Her reflection in the mirrored wall now looked wrong. Not in a dramatic way, but just subtly off, as if it was deciding how to respond. Then, a voice. So soft she thought she imagined it, whispering, right behind her. In Thai. Yakut, Diamanru. Don't press, it will know. Dao spun around. Nothing, no one. She was still alone, but her heart thudded wildly, hands trembling, skin cold. The elevator remained frozen on 14A. Dao reached for her phone, opened the camera app, and pointed it toward the mirrored panel, a weak, trembling attempt at proof. The camera feed glitched. For a moment the image stuttered, distorted, and for a single flickering frame, she saw another hand resting on her shoulder. Then the elevator lurched. The lights returned to normal. The floor panel blinked and changed. 15, 16. Dao pressed herself into the corner, trying to breathe, trying to swallow the bile rising in her throat. By the time she reached the ground floor, her legs were shaking. She stumbled out into the lobby like a woman escaping a storm. The receptionist, not Ken this time, but a quiet middle-aged guard named Somchai, glanced up from his monitor. He said nothing, but he looked at her as if he already knew. Dao approached him slowly. The elevator stopped on 14A. Somchai didn't flinch. He simply lowered his voice. You didn't step out, did you? Dao shook her head, wide-eyed. He exhaled. Good. She waited, her voice barely a whisper. Why did it stop there at all? That floor doesn't exist. Somchai hesitated. His eyes shifted, left, right, as if checking for cameras or ears. Finally, he leaned forward and spoke, barely audible. That floor was never meant to exist, but sometimes people make mistakes. They build what should be left unfinished. You didn't see anyone in the mirror, did you? Dao's mouth dried. She couldn't answer. Somchai nodded slowly. You should avoid riding alone, especially after dark. And if it stops again, don't talk to her. Dao stared. Who? He said nothing more, just turned back to his monitor. Later that night, Mark returned. Dao didn't mention the elevator. She didn't talk about the voice or the flickering numbers or the shadow hand in her camera feed. She didn't mention the guard's warning or the phrase that had etched itself into her memory like a bruise. Don't press, it will know. Instead, she sat silently on the couch while Mark talked about his boss's horrible karaoke performance and how he might be getting a raise soon. The TV buzzed low in the background. The condo felt exactly as it had the day before. Nothing had changed, except Dao. Something had followed her back. She could feel it. That night, at exactly 2:44 a.m., the smart speaker turned on by itself. Soft static, then a voice glitching through a whisper. Welcome to 14A. You came so close. Dao stared at the device, too afraid to move. And in the reflection of the glass balcony door, behind her shoulder, a figure flickered. Just once. Barefoot, thin, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, and her mouth was just beginning to open. The building denied it ever happened. That was the first thing Dao noticed. 3 days had passed since the elevator stopped at 14A, since the whisper, since the shadow in the glass. And while Mark seemed unfazed, busy with work, workouts, and complaining about internet speed, Dao had grown quieter. She avoided the elevators after dark. She left offerings at the spirit house behind the parking lot, just a few lotus flowers and a bowl of milk, not knowing what else to do, not even sure why she did it. Something inside her had shifted, a quiet, gnawing instinct, like an itch behind her soul. It started with a knock. One afternoon, as soft monsoon rain tapped gently on the balcony glass, Dao heard it, not at her front door, but at the unit next to hers, 2908, which had been empty since they moved in. A knock. Then another. She peeked through the peephole. No one there. But later, when she passed that same door on her way to the elevator, she noticed something odd. A child's drawing slipped underneath. Crayon scribbles on rough paper, red and black. A stick-figure girl in a box, a square surrounded by dark swirls, with what looked like a face in the wall behind her. The figure had no eyes, just an open mouth, too wide. Dao bent down to pick it up, but as her fingers touched the paper, the door of 2908 creaked open an inch. Empty. She stepped back. The hallway felt colder now. That evening, she went to the front desk. Ken was back, cheerful and awkward as always, tapping away at his keyboard behind the counter. Hi, Dao began slowly. Can I ask, who lives in 2908? Ken looked up, blinked, then smiled. "No one, ma'am. That unit hasn't been leased yet. Why?" Dao hesitated. "I thought I heard someone. A knock. Maybe a child." Ken frowned, tilting his head. "There are no children on this floor." He turned his monitor slightly toward her. "See? Last known entry was for you and your partner. All of the units on 29 are empty, except 2906, a bachelor, Japanese. Rarely home." Dao squinted at the log and then pointed. "What's this? Entry at 2:17 a.m. Access from elevator 3 to 14A. Ken froze. Just for a second, his finger hovered over the keyboard, but he didn't press anything. Dao continued, her voice firm now. "That was me. It stopped there. The floor lit up. I saw it." Ken turned the monitor back and cleared his throat. "I think that's just a system error. Sometimes the logs generate ghost entries if someone presses between levels or if there's a glitch in the panel." He chuckled nervously. "You know, ghost in the machine." Dao did not laugh. Later that night, she dreamed of mirrors. She was inside the elevator, watching her reflection, but her reflection moved without her, smiling slowly, then tilting its head as blood began to trickle from its mouth. When she woke, her pillow was damp with sweat and something else. She lifted it. A crayon. Red. The kind children use. Unable to shake the dread, she did what she knew Mark would hate. She went to the security room herself. She waited until Somchai was on duty, the older guard, the one who had warned her not to talk to her. He didn't greet her this time, just nodded solemnly when she stepped in, as if he already knew. "I want to see the footage from elevator 3, 2 nights ago, around 3 a.m. He said nothing, but after a moment, he turned the monitor toward her and rewound the footage. It played in silence, the camera feed from inside the elevator. The timestamp blinked softly, 03:07 a.m. The doors opened at a floor marked 14A. A girl stepped inside, barefoot. She wore an oversized school uniform, skirt torn at the hem, hair tangled around her face. She looked up toward the ceiling camera and smiled. Dao's breath caught. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at them, through the screen. Then the girl turned around and pressed a button. But the panel had no buttons. It was just flat steel. Yet the elevator moved, and the screen read, "Going inward." Not up, not down, inward. The doors opened again. A dark hallway, damp, unfinished. The girl stepped out and vanished into the blackness. Then the screen cut to static. Dao turned to Somchai, her voice shaking. Who was she? He took a long breath, then reached into a locked drawer and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, old, yellowed, brittle. He handed it to her without a word. The headline read, "Construction Site Tragedy. 3 migrant workers killed in elevator shaft collapse. No official record of names." There was a blurry photo of the half-built tower, rebar, dust, a lift pulley twisted on itself. They were building floor 14A, Somchai said quietly, before the design changed, before they decided to remove it from the plans, but it had already been poured. Just concrete, no tile, no finish. The workers fell between levels, trapped, crushed. One body was never recovered. Dao whispered, "The girl?" He nodded. Her parents kept coming for years. No one listened. No spirit rites were performed. No merit was given. Dao's mouth dried. She's still waiting. Some chide turned off the monitor. Some say the building tries to forget, but the dead don't forget so easily, especially when they were never acknowledged. Dao walked back to her apartment in silence. At her door, she found another crayon drawing tucked into the frame. This time it showed two figures, one tall, one small, both inside an elevator. Only the small one had a face, wide eyes, gaping mouth. Below the picture, scrawled in shaky Thai letters, "I found you again." The building stood tall, unmoved by the rain. From her balcony on the 29th floor, Dao watched the storm roll across the city. Monsoon clouds bruised the sky, and far below, streetlights shimmered through thin sheets of water. The city looked beautiful from this height, but she didn't trust beauty anymore. Not here. Not after what she saw in the security room. She hadn't told Mark about the footage, about the girl, about the drawing, about the elevator going inward. She tried once, but when she started to speak, he interrupted her with a joke about how this place needs better coffee and fewer ghost stories. So she said nothing. She kept the silence, and the silence kept her company. That morning, she walked alone down the back stairwell, out the side service entrance, past rows of clipped hedges and decorative palms, until she reached the thing no one ever seemed to talk about: the spirit house. It stood behind a mechanical shed, half hidden by overgrown bamboo. Small, wooden, carved with elaborate filigree that time had begun to chew through. Once painted gold, now chipped and faded, leaning slightly to one side like a forgotten dollhouse. Dao stood there for a long time. It felt like the only place in Nirvana residences where the air wasn't recycled or filtered or staged. Here, the world felt raw again, real, heavy with something ancient. The offerings inside were long decayed. Dried bananas turned to black husks. A broken soda bottle with rainwater and ants inside. Incense sticks burned down to ash. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small white flower, picked from a roadside stall that morning. A jasmine. Clean, fragrant, still alive. She placed it gently at the tiny wooden steps of the spirit house. "I saw her," Dao whispered. Wind rustled the leaves. "She's not gone." For a moment, Dao thought she heard something behind her, like a whisper through wet leaves. But when she turned, the space was empty. She knelt and cleaned the platform with her sleeve, brushing away dust, mold, and the small bones of insects. Then she lit a fresh stick of incense. Smoke curled into the air, thin, silver, trembling. And then the wind stopped. Just stopped. The trees around her stood still, as if frozen mid-sway. The air turned dense and unmoving, like it was watching her. Dao remained still. The flame at the end of the incense didn't flicker. It burned straight up. The silence pressed in. Even the distant hum of the city faded into nothing. She whispered again, "I'm sorry they forgot you." Then the stick of incense snapped in half. No breeze, no hand, just a clean, sudden break, the way a bone might snap under pressure. Dao gasped and stood, heart pounding, but nothing else happened. The air shifted. A breath was exhaled from nowhere, and the moment passed. She told herself it was her imagination. Stress, trauma, sleep deprivation. But when she returned to the building, the lights in the elevator flickered before she even pressed the button. She took the stairs. That night, she dreamed again. She was inside the elevator, but everything was wrong. The walls were concrete, unfinished, still wet in some places. No lights, no buttons, just a dull, echoing cube filled with the smell of wet cement and old blood. She turned and saw the spirit house inside the elevator, just sitting there, glowing faintly, the only thing in color. And beside it, a girl knelt, barefoot, hair covering her face, whispering words Dao couldn't hear, over and over and over again. Then the girl slowly turned her head. Her face was stitched at the mouth, and the stitches were breaking, one by one. Dao gasped and stood, heart pounding, but nothing else happened. The air shifted again. A breath was exhaled from nowhere, and the moment passed. She told herself it was her imagination. Stress, trauma, sleep deprivation. But when she returned to the building, the lights in the elevator flickered before she even pressed the button. She took the stairs. The next morning, the jasmine flower she left at the spirit house was gone. In its place was a new offering, a tiny white ceramic cup filled with red water. It hadn't been there the day before, and no one ever came back here. Dao didn't touch it. She simply whispered, "You're not alone." And for the first time, the wind answered, swirling the incense smoke into the faintest shape of a face before it vanished. It started with a tap, just after 3 a.m., soft, rhythmic, from inside the bedroom wall. At first, Dao thought it was the neighbor, maybe plumbing, maybe a pipe. But when she pressed her ear against the plaster, the tapping stopped, and something else began, a low, whispering hum, as if a voice was trying to form behind the drywall, trying to push words through layers of paint and concrete. Mark was asleep, oblivious, his breath deep and even. Dao stayed still, listening, heart pounding. The whispering continued, a muffled murmur, syllables dragging like heavy cloth across a wet floor. Then came the crying, a woman's voice, so quiet, so close. "It's so cold, it's so dark." Dao sat up, her throat tight. She knew the walls were solid, knew the unit on the other side was empty, knew no one should be there. But the voice, it sounded real, not imagined, not dreamt, real in the way trauma is real, not seen, but felt deep in the bones. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, Mark was up and caffeinated, pacing the kitchen in gym clothes, rambling about his new fitness tracker. Dao barely heard him. Her mind still lingered in the space behind the wall. Mark kissed her cheek on his way out and asked if she'd watered the potted plant on the balcony. Dao nodded absently. When the door closed, the condo fell into silence again. She stood by the bedroom wall and waited. At 11:22 a.m., the voice returned, not sobbing this time, whispering, hushed, frantic. Dao pressed her hand flat against the wall. It was warm, too warm, and the paint beneath her palm seemed to pulse faintly. She leaned in. "They never called my name." The voice cracked, almost breaking. "I didn't do anything wrong. They just left me there." Dao's chest tightened. She whispered back, "Who are you?" For a moment, silence. Then, "They built over me." Dao's knees went weak. She backed away slowly. That afternoon, she visited the property manager's office. Mr. Niren, a short, tidy man with thick glasses and a habit of smoothing his tie before every sentence, greeted her politely. "Yes, Miss Dao, how can I assist you?" She sat across from him, choosing her words carefully. "I've heard noises in the walls, in my unit." His expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. "Pipes, maybe. We've had reports of water flow echoing strangely in certain corners of the tower." She leaned forward. "I've heard a voice." Now he blinked. "Excuse me?" "In the wall. A woman, crying, talking about being buried, forgotten." Niren gave a tight smile. "Sometimes new environments can play tricks on our perception, especially with stress, moving, adjusting, unfamiliar spaces." "I saw the CCTV footage," Dao interrupted softly. That stopped him. She continued. "She was barefoot, in a school uniform, pressed a button that doesn't exist. The elevator said, 'Going inward.' She never came back out." Niren stared at her for a long time, then stood, walked to the file cabinet, pulled out a thin folder, old, dusty, yellowed with age. He laid it on the desk between them. Inside, a single photograph. A girl, late teens, hair in braids, standing on what looked like an unfinished floor. No walls, just sky and concrete. She was smiling, awkwardly. The back of the photo read, "Chalida, 14A, Final Inspection, March 14th, 2003. Dao looked up. Niren's voice was barely audible. "She was a construction worker's daughter. Came to bring him lunch. The slab collapsed. They never found her body." He closed the folder. The project was halted. Floor 14A was poured over, rebranded. That level is now a maintenance shaft. No access, no mention, by legal order. Dao's voice trembled. "But she's still there." Niren didn't reply, just smoothed his tie and turned away. That night, Dao didn't wait. She lit 3 sticks of incense, laid out jasmine rice, salted eggs, and a cup of milk in front of the bedroom wall. She placed the photograph beside it, a printed scan she had copied from the office, and she spoke out loud. "Your name is Chalida." The air in the room shifted. A low creaking sound filled the silence, the kind walls make when something moves behind them. Dao continued, her voice steady. "You are remembered. You are seen." Then the lights flickered, and from deep inside the wall, a sigh. Long, trembling, relieved. She sat there for hours. Eventually, the whispering stopped.
And when she slept, for the first time in weeks, her dreams were quiet. But in the morning, the offerings were gone, and the wall had a handprint on it, small, faint, pressed into the paint from inside.
The building didn't want to be remembered. Dao was starting to believe that. The walls held secrets like lungs held breath, long, tight, refusing to let go. After the incident with the handprint, she tried to tell Mark again, tried to explain the voice, the forgotten girl, the wall that sighed, the photo, the elevator that stopped at a place not meant to exist. Mark listened, halfway. He nodded. He rubbed his eyes. Then he said the worst possible thing. You should talk to someone. Not with, not to him. Someone else. Dao stopped speaking. She turned instead to someone who might actually see what she saw. His name was Nati, a local architecture student and part-time assistant at a university archive. They'd met during a tour of the city's preserved temples a few years back. He was obsessed with spaces, especially the ones erased from maps. Dao called him. He listened quietly, then asked one thing. What's the building's original name? Dao hesitated, then replied, It wasn't always Nirvana Residences. It used to be Chao Phraya Horizon Tower. Construction began in 2002, changed hands after the collapse. Nati exhaled sharply. I'll find what I can. 2 days later, he arrived at Dao's condo with a backpack full of rolled-up blueprints and a look on his face that was equal parts awe and dread. They sat at her dining table, which had barely been used since she moved in, and unscrolled the past. Blueprints, stacked, annotated, redacted. Some had official seals. Others were yellowed photocopies. One even had bloodstains, faded to rust-colored smudges in the margins. They tried to erase this floor, Nati said softly, but construction had already begun. There were permits, deliveries, pour dates. He pointed to a cross-section. Here, floor 14A. It was designed as an internal service level. Power routing, air filtration cores, lift calibration. Dao stared. So it really did exist? It still does, he replied. But here's the thing. He unrolled another page. The architectural plans stop mid-floor. There's no proper drainage, no completed walls, no ceiling finish. It's a sealed cavity. Dao's stomach twisted. How do you seal a cavity with people inside? Nati looked up. You don't. Not if you're human. According to an archived construction report, one that had been filed, denied, refiled under a different department, then buried, there had been 3 fatalities during the 14A build. A father, his apprentice, and his teenage daughter, present on the site without official record. Their names were never listed. No compensation was issued. And because no shrine was built, no rites were performed. Dao whispered, They were forgotten. Nati nodded grimly. The contractor fled the country before investigations concluded. The new developers paved over the whole level. Legally, 14A doesn't exist, but spiritually, it's still open. They returned to the blueprints. In one corner, drawn hastily in pencil, was a symbol Dao didn't recognize.
a triangle with a slash through the center. She pointed. "What's that?" Nati went pale. "That's a builder's warning. Traditional. You draw it when you know the land is unsettled, when something is already there." Dao's breath caught. "Already there?" He nodded. "It means the land isn't empty, that if you build over it, you should make offerings, beg forgiveness." Dao stared at the triangle. Something ancient and primal twisted in her chest. They didn't. That night, Dao couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from awareness. She walked barefoot across the apartment, past Mark sleeping on the couch with the TV still glowing, down the hall, back to the bedroom wall where the voice used to come. She pressed her ear against it. Silence. Then tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks. And then, very softly, "I know you now." Dao whispered back, "I remember you." Then a shiver rolled through the floor. Not violent, not loud, just a tremor that made the wine glasses in the cabinet gently ring as if an answer. In the morning, Nati arrived, holding something in a cloth bag. A fragment of a small ceramic bowl, hairline cracks along the edge, burn marks on the inside. "I took it from the lower construction vault," he admitted. "They were going to toss it during the last retrofit." Dao took it reverently. "It's hers." He nodded. "You need to bury it, properly, somewhere that breathes." Dao knew the place, behind the building, where the spirit house stood. That night, she carried the bowl fragment in both hands. The moon was full, the sky mercifully clear. At the base of the spirit house, she dug a small hole with a trowel and buried the bowl in silence. Then she lit 3 incense sticks, bowed 3 times, and said her name. "Chalida, I give you back your place in the world." The air changed again. Warm wind brushed her face. The spirit house creaked softly, as if shifting under invisible weight. Dao stepped back, and for the first time, she felt something lift. A pressure, a presence, receding, not gone, but seen. Back in her room, she slept soundly, until just before dawn when the elevator dinged on its own. No one called it. The number above the door flickered once, 14A. But the elevator didn't open. It just waited, as if bowing in gratitude before vanishing again.
The floor had been quiet, too quiet, and Dao knew that meant it was listening. Since the burial of the bowl, things had changed, not dramatically, not violently, but in a way that made her skin buzz with intuition. No more whispers in the walls, no sighs, no crying. But the elevator had started to misbehave. It began with lights flickering, only inside elevator 3. Always elevator 3, never 1 or 2. Then came the sounds. The speakers, normally reserved for soft instrumental music, would sometimes crackle and emit a child's hum, off-key, slow, repeating just 4 notes. Dao timed it. It always played at 3:07 a.m. Residents began to notice. First was a woman from the 21st floor, a Filipina nurse who worked night shifts. She complained to the manager that the elevator skipped her floor entirely one night, despite pressing the button 3 times. It just kept going, and the floor it stopped on wasn't real. It looked unfinished. The air smelled like cement and old blood. Then came the teenager from 17F, who posted a TikTok claiming the mirrors inside elevator 3 glitched and showed her standing behind herself, even though she was alone.
Dao saw the video. The girl had screamed, bolted out, and the elevator doors, rather than closing, had stayed open for over 2 minutes. No movement, no sound, just a still image of her reflection, smiling. Dao knew what it meant. The floor was hungry again. She went to the spirit house that night. Rain had begun to fall, a soft drizzle that made the air smell of dust and secrets. She brought rice this time, candles and incense made with dried lotus petals. She lit everything in silence, knelt on the damp soil, and bowed 3 times. "You're still here. I know that now." The wind responded, brushing past her cheek like a cold hand. "What do you want?" And then she heard it, not in her ears, inside her chest. Words pressed into her thoughts like a wet thumb into clay. "I was never given anything. No name, no light, only silence, only walls." Dao's breath shuddered. "What can I give you now?" The flame of one candle tilted violently. The smoke curled upward in a circle, then a mouth. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she prepared. At dawn, she descended to the basement, past the locked utility doors, past the signs that read "Authorized personnel only." There was a door that hadn't been opened in years, rusted, bolted shut, covered in layers of paint and disregard. Dao stood before it, holding a simple bag. Inside, a small bowl of fresh rice, a handmade paper crane, a school badge, and a strand of her own hair. She whispered, "I remember," and placed the bag at the foot of the sealed door and walked away. That night, the building slept, but the floor ate. The next day, reports stopped. No elevator glitches, no voices, no flickers, no disappearing floors. The manager sent a building-wide email. "Thank you for your patience during our recent electrical recalibration. Elevator 3 is now fully functional." Dao said nothing, but she saw the change. People smiled more in the lobby. The air felt lighter. No more tightness in the walls. The mirrors behaved again. Even Mark noticed. "You finally saged the place or something? It's almost peaceful in here." Dao smiled faintly. But peace was a transaction, and she had learned the cost. On the 7th day after her offering, Dao awoke to a faint tapping at her door. Not knocking, tapping, like fingernails, delicate, intentional. She opened it. No one there. But taped to the peephole was a folded piece of paper. Inside, a drawing, childlike, crude. A girl with long hair standing next to an elevator. Beside it, a second figure. Dao recognized herself. Below it, in messy red crayon, "Thank you, you can hear me." And something else, scribbled in shaky handwriting. "But they're hungry too." That night, a new voice came from the elevator speaker. Low, hoarse, male. "I was under the scaffold. They never pulled me out." Dao's breath caught. She returned to the blueprints, reread the reports. The tragedy didn't claim just one life. There were 3, and she had only fed 1.
In Thai folklore, there is a spirit known as the Preta, a ghost of unbearable hunger, tall as a tower, thin as smoke, its mouth no larger than a pinhole, cursed to starve for eternity. It is said the Preta wanders between spaces, hallways, thresholds, cracks in the world, searching not for food, but for remembrance, for a name, for a face that once knew it. Tao read these words at 2:30 in the morning, alone, lit only by the glow of her laptop, and it felt less like reading and more like recognizing. The whisper in her walls had changed. Where once it wept, it now watched. Tao could feel it. At first, she thought it was residual, echoes of the girl she'd helped. But then it came again, and this time the voice was not hers. You gave her light, but I've been here longer. Low, male, bitter with time. It spoke when Tao passed the hallway. It echoed in the pipes when she turned on the shower. It hummed in the fridge motor, subtly forming syllables. She was only one. I saw all three fall. Tao searched for answers. She reached out to a retired monk she had met once during her college years, Ajahn Kam, known for his work with cursed spaces and lost spirits. She met him at a small temple on the city's edge. He didn't smile, but he listened. And when she finished, he simply nodded. You have awakened a floor that was sealed with no blessing. That is a wound. Wounds fester. Tao asked, What is it now? Ajahn looked at her, face lined with a kind of sorrow that came from seeing too much. It is becoming a preta. But that's a story, a symbol of greed. No, he replied gently. It is not about greed. It is about absence. When someone dies in silence, without name, without light, their soul stretches thin. It becomes hunger, not for food, but for meaning. And if that hunger finds a home, he looked at her sharply, it waits. That night, Mark's phone rang. The screen read Tao, but she was standing right in front of him. Confused, he answered. At first, static. Then a faint voice, not Tao's. You forgot the others. She remembers only one. Then a sound, like a mouth full of gravel trying to scream through a slit too small. Mark threw the phone across the room. Tao didn't speak. She just picked up the phone and quietly turned it off. Later, as she washed the dishes, the smart speaker activated on its own. Playing recommended voice memo. Tao froze. A recording began to play. Shuffling sounds. Then a voice, low, guttural, male. I held her hand. She was shaking. Then the beam fell. I couldn't scream. My mouth wouldn't open. I'm still here, still here, still. Tao unplugged the speaker, but it kept playing. The preta was not a metaphor, not anymore. It had found a crack, a way to speak, and it was getting stronger. The next night, Mark woke up gasping. Tao rushed to his side, but he pushed her away, eyes wild. You were talking in your sleep, but your mouth wasn't moving. Tao froze. It was wide open, too wide, and I couldn't close it, and you... He stopped, swallowed. You said, I'm still hungry. Tao began lighting incense in every room. She left sticky rice by the windows. She burned sandalwood and lotus oil. But the floor was no longer satisfied with symbols. It wanted substance. Elevator 3 began acting again. The maintenance team replaced the circuit board. The next day, it was fried,
charred from the inside, as if burned by something electrical and alive. Residents reported seeing someone in the elevator, tall, pale, with no face, just a vertical slit where the mouth should be, long arms dragging, and breathing sounds that shook the vents. One woman fainted. A man moved out without explanation. Dao knew what she had to do. She returned to Ajahn Kam. "How do I stop it?" He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't stop it. You feed it." Dao went still. "Feed it?" He nodded solemnly. "Not food, not blood. You feed it with what it lost. Memory. You give it back what was taken. Their names, their work, their suffering. You remind the floor that it was once alive, and then maybe it will sleep." Dao exhaled slowly. "And if I fail?" Ajahn voice was quiet. "Then the Preta will open the door and ask for more." That night, she opened her laptop. She began researching construction reports, undocumented labor deaths, names never printed. She created a file titled The Forgotten Three, and she wrote everything she could find: their language, their origin, their photos where available, their ages. Then she printed each page and rode the elevator down. When it stopped on its own at 14A, she didn't flinch. The doors slid open to a wall of unfinished concrete, wet, gray, breathing. Dao stepped forward and slid the pages through a crack near the frame. "You are remembered now." From behind the wall came a single sound, like weeping, not of pain, but of relief. Then the doors closed, and the elevator rose again. Dao didn't look back. But when she stepped out on her floor, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. One word: more.
It arrived without a sender. A brown envelope slid under her door in the middle of the night. No knock, no sound, no return address. Dao found it at dawn, half tucked into the light spill from the hallway, like something hesitant, almost shy about being seen. Inside, one photograph. Old, grainy, curled at the corners. A girl stood in an unfinished concrete room. The ceiling above her still bore rebar, and the walls were cracked and wet, with chalk markings faded along the seams. She wore a utility vest 2 sizes too large, a construction helmet tilted slightly off. She wasn't smiling, just looking directly at the camera, as if she saw through it. On the back, written in red pen, was a message: Unit 1401A. She never left. Dao's hands trembled. There was no such unit. She checked the building's layout again, floor by floor. She knew them now like a blueprint stitched into her mind, but still, she searched. There was 1401, there was 1402, but no 1401A. Nowhere. And yet, the name persisted. That night, the elevator stopped on its own, again. Not at 14A, but at 14, a floor that should have existed. The doors opened. Behind them was nothing. Not a hallway, not a shaft, not even darkness. Just a wall, flat, damp, scarred by time. Dao reached out, pressed her hand to it, and a sound pulsed beneath the concrete, like a breath drawn in too deep just beneath the surface. Then came the whisper, "This was our room." Dao stumbled backward. The elevator doors slid closed. On the way up, the screen flickered, not in error, but as if deliberately typed.
It read 1401A, still registered. She blinked. How could a unit be registered if it wasn't built? She visited the building's central office again. Ken wasn't at the desk. Instead, a new face greeted her, a young intern barely out of university, typing idly at a computer. Dao leaned in. Can you show me unit records, specifically 1401A? The girl smiled politely. I don't think that exists, ma'am. We don't have A units. That's not in our database. Dao held up the photograph. It does exist. The girl hesitated, then checked the system, paused, frowned, clicked again, and slowly looked up. There's something. A file was archived, deactivated, flagged as administrative error. No tenant, no layout. She turned the monitor toward Dao. It says, room sealed, no access, do not assign. Dao leaned in. Can you print it? I'm not supposed to. Please. The girl hesitated, then pressed Control-P. Dao took the printed sheet home. It wasn't much, just a rough layout. A single room, concrete walls, no plumbing, no electrical plans, a box in space. But it was labeled Unit 1401A, Temporary Quarters, Construction Oversight Crew. Dao stared at the word temporary. That night, she dreamed again. She stood in a room with no windows, just one metal door, a flickering overhead light. In the center, 3 mattresses on a concrete floor, sheets folded, untouched. Beside them, 3 pairs of work boots. One pair was tiny. And across from her, in the far corner, a girl sat, arms wrapped around her knees, staring into the wall. Dao called out, "Who are you?" The girl didn't move, but the wall in front of her began to bleed. Thin red lines seeped through the cracks. Then, in a voice that echoed like stone breaking under pressure, "If you erase a room, the memories go hungry." Dao awoke with a start, heart pounding. She went down to the lobby again, this time at 3:07 a.m., alone. The elevator doors opened before she touched the button. Inside, the control panel was different. It had one extra button, 1401A. She didn't press it. She just stared. But it began to glow on its own, and the elevator moved. When the doors opened, she stepped into air that didn't breathe. The hallway was unfinished, cinder blocks exposed, wires hanging like veins from an open ceiling. A single door stood at the end, Unit 1401A. No p-hole, no number plate, just a door. Dao reached for the knob. It turned. She pushed gently and found nothing inside. No furniture, no paint, just a concrete room. And in the far corner, a shadow. Not cast, not shaped, just standing there, waiting. Dao stepped forward, and the air grew thick with silence. Then the wall began to speak, not in words, but in names. Names scratched into the concrete, revealing themselves like invisible ink soaked in memory. Prasert, Anan, Chalida. Dao's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "I see you now." And the shadow bowed, not in gratitude, but in relief. When Dao stepped into the elevator, the button for 1401A was gone, and the hallway behind her had vanished. The next morning, a new email from building management arrived. It read, "Notice, Unit 1401A does not exist. Please disregard any unauthorized reports." Dao stared at it for a long time, then opened the photograph again, and in the corner of the room, behind the girl's shoulder, she now saw something she hadn't noticed before. A fourth shadow, half visible, tall, and hungry.
The machines started misbehaving first. It began with the lights, flickering in patterns, not random. Long, short, long again. Morse, perhaps, or just mimicry, but always in the same spots. The hallway outside the bedroom, the corner of the kitchen, and the inside of elevator 3. Then came the smart systems. The thermostat began adjusting itself. The shower turned on without command. The balcony doors, supposedly sealed, clicked open in the middle of the night, letting in air that smelled like concrete dust. Mark blamed bugs in the firmware. Dao knew better. At 2:13 a.m., her smart TV turned on. Static. Then grainy footage. A corridor she didn't recognize. Unfinished. A girl walking away from the camera, barefoot. Her outline hazy, glitching at the edges. Dao tried to turn it off. The remote didn't respond. Instead, the screen zoomed in on the girl's back, and slowly she turned her head. Dao's own face stared back. Not live, not mirrored, just her, but too still, too quiet, mouth slightly open, eyes blank. Dao unplugged the TV. The screen stayed on for 3 full seconds before going dark. Mark finally noticed. He woke one morning drenched in sweat, swearing that the voice assistant had spoken to him in a language he couldn't identify. It sounded like Khmer or Lao, but broken, choppy, and it kept saying one thing. Dao asked gently, "What did it say?" He hesitated. It said, "Open the door inward." Dao didn't reply, because that's exactly what the elevator had said. The next night, Mark's phone rang again. He showed her the screen, wide-eyed. "It's me, but I didn't call." The caller ID said Dao. The location ping? Unit 1401A. He answered it on speaker. Static. Then a voice. "This is not your face, but I like how it fits." Dao dropped the phone. From then on, the haunting spread digitally. The building's resident portal glitched. Her unit listed twice, once as 2907 and once again under a separate tab titled Shadow Registry. When she clicked it, the browser froze. The next morning, she received a welcome email. "Congratulations on activating Unit 1401A. You are now its registered occupant. This unit does not support mail forwarding. Occupancy is permanent." She stared at the screen in horror. Then her webcam turned on. Just for a moment. Nati came over that night, called by Dao's shaking voice and frantic texts. She showed him everything. The emails, the photo that kept duplicating itself in her folders, each version slightly more distorted. In one, her eyes were gone. In another, her mouth was stitched shut. Nati stared in silence. They've found a host, a way to live through the system, through identity, digital footprint. Your name is becoming theirs. Dao whispered, "They're rewriting me." Nati suggested disconnecting everything, a digital cleanse. They unplugged the modem, smashed the smart speaker, pulled the backup battery from the wall, erased the apps. Dao even disabled facial recognition on her phone. But the next day, it reactivated itself, and her lock screen was no longer her. It was a photo of Chalida, but her eyes were Dao's. That afternoon, the property management installed a new smart panel in the lobby, meant to allow face scan entry.
Dao walked by casually, just observing. As another tenant approached the panel, it greeted him normally. "Welcome, Mr. Tanaka." Then Dao stepped forward. It scanned, paused, then said, "Welcome back, Chalida." Dao stepped back, her knees weakened. No one else noticed. At home, her laptop began typing by itself. Not fast, slow, like fingers dragging across keys. She watched, paralyzed, as it formed a message on an empty Word doc. "She fits. You're warm. You're breathing. She was not. We are ready." Dao whispered, "Ready for what?" The cursor blinked. Then, "To live again." The haunting was no longer confined to spaces. It had taken names, voices, digital presence. They were becoming her, or she was becoming them. The next time she entered the elevator, the panel didn't ask for a floor. It simply lit up with two options: Dao, Chalida, and waited. Dao didn't touch anything. The elevator descended anyway.
They say spirits cling to spaces that are unfinished, between the cracks of construction and memory, in stairwells that lead nowhere, in false floors and forgotten rooms, and walls that were never meant to breathe. Dao had always thought that was just poetic, until now. Because whatever lived in 1401A, it wasn't dead. Not entirely. The elevator knew her name now. Every time she entered, it paused. A breath, a soft click behind the walls. Then the screen would flicker, sometimes showing her face, other times a name that wasn't hers. Chalida, Anan, Prasert. Once, it showed all three, followed by, "We are not gone. We are waiting." Dao fought out Ajahn Kom again. He met her in the back courtyard of the temple, a garden littered with broken statues where spirits were said to rest between rebirths. She told him everything: the name duplications, the elevator choices, the voice through the TV, the digital replication, the merging. When she finished, he didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, he said, "It no longer wants revenge. It wants place. It wants to exist through you." Dao's voice cracked. "Can I stop it?" "No," he said gently, "but you can make it let go." "How?" He looked up at the setting sun. "You must perform the Kunwinyan ritual to bring the soul back to its body, or what remains of it, to close the space that was opened without permission." Dao frowned. "But there is no body, no grave." "Then you must build one, a space to contain the memory, a vessel, something real." "Like an altar?" "No," he said, "a room." That night, Dao turned her spare room into a shrine. She stripped it bare, removed the bed, covered the floor in rice paper. On each wall, she pinned copies of the blueprints, the photographs, the faces. She lit candles at each corner, one for each of the three spirits: Chalida, Anan, Prasert. Once, it showed all three, followed by, "We are not gone. We are waiting." She played old recordings of chanting monks from a temple that no longer existed, and she placed 3 bowls at the center of the room: salted fish, steamed rice, a single ripe banana. The air turned heavy as soon as the candlelight flickered. She began to speak. "You are remembered. You are seen. This room is yours now. Come back to it and rest."
The walls responded. A low moan, as though the drywall had taken breath. The floor beneath the bowls shifted ever so slightly. And then a smell filled the room. Not rot, not fire, but dust and sweat, the scent of a construction site. Dao knelt and pressed her forehead to the floor. "I give this space back to you." Suddenly, the lights died. Every one. Darkness swallowed her, and in the silence came footsteps. Bare, slow, wet. They circled her once, twice, then stopped behind her. She didn't look. She whispered, "I'm not your body, but I will carry your name." Then a hand brushed her hair. Cold, not cruel, just tired. And the voice, no longer broken, no longer echoed, whispered clearly, "I can sleep now." In the morning, all the candles had burned to nothing. The bowls were empty. The papers remained on the walls untouched, but one of them now had a new drawing, in red ink, a room with 3 people sleeping peacefully inside. That day, Dao felt different, not haunted, not broken, but heavier, like she was sharing her breath with something ancient and sorrowful. In the elevator, the panel didn't flicker. It simply showed 29. And when she got out, the screen glowed with a single word: "Thank you." That evening, she walked the building's hallways. The lights didn't blink, the vents didn't groan, the walls didn't breathe. She passed Unit 1401. No A, no door beyond, just smooth drywall. Erased, or finally at peace. But as she returned to her room, she noticed something new. A hairline crack had formed in the hallway mirror, and just beneath the surface, if she looked closely, she could see a reflection that wasn't hers, smiling.
On the 7th night after building the room, Dao disappeared. There were no broken locks, no signs of struggle. Her shoes were still by the door, phone left charging, dinner uneaten. Mark woke up to silence. But the elevator was moving, alone. The security logs showed her keycard accessing elevator 3 at 11:58 p.m. Camera footage was corrupted, nothing but black static. But the elevator logs, backed up on a secondary server, revealed one thing. A new destination had been added to the panel, just for a moment, then erased. 14AR. No such level had ever existed, but it meant something. R meant Rongrien, the Thai word for classroom, or in older usage, ritual. Dao had gone to finish what she started. She had gone inward. She had prepared everything. In her pocket, she carried 3 grains of rice, a shard of the broken ceramic bowl, a folded drawing from the girl, the one that said, "I found you again." She wore white. She stepped into elevator 3 at 11:55 p.m., clutching her offering. On the 7th night after building the room, Dao disappeared. There were no broken locks, no signs of struggle. Her shoes were still by the door, phone left charging, dinner uneaten. Mark woke up to silence, but the elevator was moving, alone. The security log showed her keycard accessing elevator 3 at 11:58 p.m. Camera footage was corrupted, nothing but black static. But the elevator logs, backed up on a secondary server, revealed one thing. A new destination had been added to the panel, just for a moment, then erased. 14A, R. No such level had ever existed, but it meant something. R, Rong Rien, the Thai word for classroom, or in older usage, ritual. Dao had gone to finish what she started. She had gone inward. She had prepared everything. In her pocket, she carried 3 grains of rice, a shard of the broken ceramic bowl, and a folded drawing from the girl, the one that said, "I found you again." She wore white. She stepped into elevator 3 at 11:55 p.m., clutching her offerings in both hands. The doors closed. She didn't press anything, but the elevator moved. Down, past floor 14, past 14A, and then into something else. The light changed, not out, just different. Dim, yellowed, like the air had turned into old paper. The walls began to peel, revealing rough concrete beneath polished steel. And then the elevator stopped. The screen read, "Ritual space engaged." The doors opened. Dao stepped out. The hallway beyond wasn't real. Or perhaps it had once been. It resembled the corridor from the original blueprints, narrow, low, unfinished. Wires dangled from the ceiling like hanging vines. Water stains bloomed along the walls. But the space breathed. And somewhere ahead, chanting. Not sung, not joyful. Chanted as if from cracked throats, long unused. Dao walked toward it. She entered a room lit by candles pressed into the walls. 3 figures knelt at the center. Not ghosts, not people, just outlines, made of dust and memory, moving as though remembered into being. Dao knelt before them, placed the shard, the rice, and the drawing in front of her. She bowed 3 times and began the Kun Winyan. Her voice was steady, each line repeated 3 times. "You are not lost. You are not gone. I bring you back." The shadows began to rise, slowly, gently. They turned toward her, and one by one, they stepped into her. Not possession, not invasion, but merging, like 3 memories finally finding a voice to live in. Dao's head fell forward, her arms trembled, but her mouth kept moving. "This is your body now. This is your peace. This is your name." Then, silence. The shadows bowed. The candles blew out all at once. Darkness swallowed the room. At 3:22 a.m., the elevator returned to the 29th floor, empty. Dao was gone. She returned 3 hours later, just appeared, standing barefoot in the lobby, soaked in sweat, hands stained with concrete dust, but unharmed. She didn't speak. She just walked past the security guard, up the stairs, and entered her unit. Mark was still awake, trembling. He reached for her. Where did you go?" Dao looked at him and smiled, a real smile, to give them a home. She slept for 12 hours straight, and when she woke, she didn't remember the walk back. But in her hand was a folded piece of paper, drawn in red crayon, a room lit by candles, and inside 3 sleeping figures with smiles on their faces. Later that night, Dao lit 3 sticks of incense. She stood on the balcony, staring at the city. She whispered, "You are safe now." And far below, inside elevator 3, the lights stayed steady. No flickers,
No stops. Only peace. For now. For a while, the building slept. No elevator flickers. No whispering mirrors. No misplaced drawings. It was as if Nirvana Residences had finally earned its name, a place suspended above the noise of the city, untouched by grief or memory. But peace, Dao knew, is not the same as silence, and silence, true silence, is a warning. It began again on the 8th night. A notice appeared in the lobby. Elevator 3, scheduled maintenance. Expect minor delays. Dao's stomach dropped. She approached the front desk. Ken wasn't there. Instead, a new uniform. A younger guard, polite but distant. She asked, "What kind of maintenance?" He glanced at the log. "Oh, nothing serious. They're sealing off an unused service hatch on the 14th floor. Looks like some construction was never fully finished." Dao felt cold. "You're not supposed to touch anything near 14. The guard looked confused. "It's just drywall." Dao didn't respond. That night, elevator 3 stopped again. But this time, it groaned. Not mechanical, not friction. A sound like something waking up after being disturbed too soon. She took the stairs. Every landing felt wrong, like the air was too dense, like she was being measured by something in the walls. On floor 14, the hallway was blocked by temporary partitions, plastic sheets, fresh cement smell. Dao pulled one corner back. Behind it, a hole in the wall, a doorway roughly cut, leading into 14A. Someone had opened the wound. She entered. The air was thick, still. The floor beneath her feet had been freshly poured, not fully set. As she stepped forward, her foot sank slightly. The concrete gripped her shoe like flesh. And at the center of the room, a makeshift altar had been torn down. Offerings crushed under boot prints. Burnt incense snapped. A broken bowl. A crayon drawing trampled under dust and work gloves. Dao picked it up. It was the same image as before. A girl in a room, but this time her mouth was sewn shut again. And above the figure, scratched in red, "You left the door open." She ran, back to her unit, back to the spirit house. She lit incense, placed food, chanted the names. But something was wrong. The candles flickered wildly. The rice spoiled within minutes. The air was thick with the smell of wet iron. She whispered, "I didn't forget. I didn't abandon you." And a voice answered from behind her, behind the wall, from inside the concrete. "But they did." That night, a new resident disappeared. A delivery driver had seen him step into elevator 3 at 1:12 a.m. He never arrived home, never logged out of the building. Security footage showed the elevator descend. Floor 14, floor 14A. Then the screen scrambled, and when it cleared, the elevator was empty. Dao went back to the building manager. She demanded to know who authorized construction on 14A. The manager looked confused. "We didn't. There are no current work orders on that level. 414 is sealed, always has been." She showed him photos. The hole, the fresh cement, the trampled shrine. He went pale. "That's impossible," Dao whispered. "You opened it." She returned to the spirit house. Outside, in the overgrown grass, a new bowl had been placed, one she didn't bring. Inside it, 3 teeth, small, white, still bleeding. Dao fell to her knees. "What do you want from me?" And the wind, gentle at first, screamed through the trees. "Close the room. Bury it again, or it will eat everything." She understood. This wasn't about peace. It was about respect, about balance, about remembering that the dead do not forgive negligence. The ritual had worked once, but it was ongoing. The offerings must continue, not forever, but until memory outweighs silence. She returned to 14A one last time, this time with tools. She repaired the altar, lit new candles, smeared her own blood onto the concrete, just a drop, as an acknowledgement. And she placed a new drawing at the center. This one, drawn by her own hand. 3 workers, a girl, an unfinished room, and a single line at the bottom. This space remembers you. She sealed the door herself, poured fresh cement, etched their names into the wall with her finger, and whispered, "You are not forgotten, but you must rest." The room exhaled, and the crack in the hallway mirror disappeared. That night, the smart speaker turned on. One last message. "Thank you for continuing your stay in Nirvana Residences. Your unit is now aligned. All guests have checked out." Dao smiled and blew out the candles.
Years passed. Residents came and went. The pool reopened. The cafe on the ground floor became a trendy wine bar. Elevator 3 got a full panel upgrade. Sleek touchscreen interface, voice-responsive, polished chrome casing. No one talked about floor 14 anymore. Or 14A. Or what had happened there. They had moved on. As buildings do, as people pretend to. Dao stayed. She didn't move out. She never really explained why. Mark had long since left, unable to reconcile the quiet woman who walked through the halls at 3 a.m., lighting incense and whispering names that didn't appear on any lease. He said she'd changed. She agreed. They called it healing. But Dao knew better. Some things don't heal. Some things must simply be fed, remembered. She still made the offerings, not every day now, not out of fear, but respect. A banana, 3 grains of rice, a single white flower, left at the base of the spirit house behind the hedge, the one management still hadn't torn down. She spoke their names softly, even when no one else did. Then, one day, a new tenant arrived, young, polite, curious. She ran into him in the elevator. He asked which floor she lived on. Dao smiled. 29. He nodded, then asked something that made her pause. What's with the button gap? There's no floor 14, but then why does the panel hesitate there, like it wants to stop? Dao looked at the screen. Indeed, the elevator had stuttered between 13 and 15. A half-second blink, a hesitation, the ghost of a floor. Dao simply said, "Old building, glitches happen." The young man chuckled. Still, kinda creepy, like there's a floor hiding in there, floor 14 and a half or something. Dao's smile didn't reach her eyes. Just superstition. The elevator dinged. He stepped out. She stayed behind and pressed no buttons. The elevator descended anyway. It stopped, not at 29, not at 14, but something in between. There was no number, just a pause. Then from the speaker above, "This unit belongs to her now." Dao didn't move, didn't panic. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Let it rest." The doors opened, but behind them only darkness, not threatening, just still. Dao stepped forward, reached her hand into the void, and found nothing. No breath, no shadow, no pull.
just quiet. The elevator rose again. When it reached 29, the panel blinked as normal. Dao stepped out. A tenant waiting nearby looked confused. Wasn't the elevator empty just now? Dao looked at him, smiled softly. Some things are only empty when no one remembers them. She walked past. Later that night, the building's voice assistant played its usual welcome message. Thank you for staying at Nirvana Residences, where peace meets the sky. Dao stood by her window, looked out over the city. The skyline buzzed in distant neon. She whispered to the glass, Nirvana is just a word. Then turned, walked back into her unit, and quietly closed the door. Far below, in elevator 3, the lights flickered once, then dimmed, and for just a moment, the screen read, 14A, memory preserved, then blinked away, and no one noticed, except the building and the floor that was never supposed to be built.